Bonzu talk had a mask with a red thing right there, which was, some Japanese emblem. But from the back, it looked like a pair of lips. And you're like, is there a hole there? It was kind of creepy. Anyway, let me start the panel off. The panel is lost, or at least confused, in space. I'm your moderator, Brother Guy Consolmagno. We have with us Karen Harkis, James Plaxco, and Bill Higgins. And I'll read you the supposed idea. Right now, it's fashionable to say that we're going back to the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. How well would that actually work? After the first Mars landing, will it too be demoted to a stepping stone to somewhere else? And if so, where? Should we really make everything else secondary to one set of goalposts? It didn't work so well the last time. What should be our goals in space, and in what order? So, the first thing I will ask is for our panel to introduce themselves. Karen.
This microphone does not like me too much. Hi, I am Karen Harkis. I write found family-focused science fiction. How's that? I got all that out without stumbling. And none of it involves going out to space because I broke the world and then we made it. We're still on our way out to space in it, but I still remember the moon launch and I follow NASA a lot, so I guess that's why they let me be on the panel. That's me. I worked in, my space credits are huge. I worked in a bookstore for 20 years.
Finding space.
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Jim Plaxco, digital artist, creative coder, a president of president of Chicago Society for Space Studies, a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador, and I'm appearing here tonight as a space ambassador for the National Space Society, although the crazy opinions I express are not necessarily those of the National Space Society.
Which has their own crazy opinions.
I'm Bill Higgins. I'm a member of the National Space Society. I might or might not be a member of the Chicago Society for Space Studies.
You're on my list.
I'm on the list. Okay. I have been in the past.
He didn't say which list.
Yeah. Right. And I work as a physicist at Fermilab, but none of these opinions are Fermilab's. And I also volunteer as a NASA Solar System Ambassador, but none of these opinions are NASA's. And otherwise, I've just been really interested in space and made a study of it and talked about it and written about it for many, many years to a whole lot of people. So I am pleased to be back again with some familiar panelists and kicking around. Okay, what happens in space next?
And I'm the moderator. I'm Brother Guy Consolmagno. I'm the director of the Vatican Observatory. And to repeat a joke I've used at every panel so far, I wound up going to MIT to be a planetary scientist as an excuse to go to MIT to read science fiction. So that's clearly my first love. I've been in the planetary sciences field for 50 years, and never once have I been affiliated with any space mission. On the other hand, I can say that I'm happy to express the opinions which are my own and not necessarily those of Pope Francis. What I want to do is, in some ways, take the question in the reverse order. And I have a method to my madness, but starting with Bill, and I'll include myself in the list, forget about what the nation needs, what science needs, what you could get paid for. If you could go to space, where would you go and what would you do?
Okay, and it's easy. I have adequate resources to get a spaceship that goes wherever I want it to go?
Yep.
Wow.
What's your goal, ultimately?
Oh, my goal is the easy and obvious one is to explore everything. So learn as much as we can with whatever our resources allow about the bits and pieces of things that are in our solar system, and as much as we can about the solar systems beyond, to try to understand asteroids, planets, comets, and how they all go together, and what the evolutionary history of our solar system might be, and what the others, what might be true of the other exoplanet systems. This is alongside whatever we want to do, build cool stuff or go live someplace in the solar system, because there's plenty of room for goals like that, and I presume we will be discussing them as well. But I'm going to pick science, and I want my robot agents to go everywhere, or all of the everywheres we can manage. You've done a flyby of Pluto, and it's marvelous. When are we going to do a Pluto orbiter? I could ask the same question for Uranus and Neptune at this stage. When will people walk? People have walked on the moon. There's lots more places on the moon to walk on. And scientists or astronauts were actually quite useful in doing the science on the moon. Were they with the money? Who knows? But we definitely got more science out of the Apollo program because astronauts were working on the moon. All of that stuff. And there are more places that you could imagine people wanting to go. Probably not the moons of Jupiter, because they're difficult to walk on. If you could make a habitat under the ice in Europa, you could perhaps explore Europa from there. It'd be nice radiation shielding. There's all kinds of asteroids that would be great to walk around on and explore a little bit. Other more hospitable moons here and there among the planets. All the places.
Everywhere.
Do all the places.
Right.
Okay. Just to shuffle things around.
Surprise me.
Yep.
All right, so I didn't mention this, but my degree is in biology with a concentration in botany. So I have to, and I'm also known for answering questions. So let me get a clarification. Do I have to stick to current physics, or do I get my space opera?
Stick to the solar system.
Okay, stick to the solar system. I absolutely want to get my sampler robots or my touristy, I get to go see it all spaceship out to those moons of Jupiter where I can't land, but I can get lots of samples and really get into a nice study of the fuzzy boundary between organic chemistry and chemistry, where you get micelles that might turn into cells that might turn into light. I want to know if it's hiding in there, because it certainly could be. That's what I would want.
Okay, I'm going to make myself go third and let you back clean up. I mentioned science fiction. The story that stuck with me was Robert Heinlein's The Menace from Earth. I want to fly. I want to be in a colony on the moon where they've sealed off one of the caverns, pressurized it, and issued you wings so you could fly. That's what I want to do. Now, you mentioned the icy moons of Jupiter. I wrote my thesis about them. You'd think I'd be in with it. No, I want to fly. You mentioned exploring. You think I do that for a living? No, I want to fly.
Could you do this on Titan in the outdoors?
Ooh, excellent question. I think didn't what's his name? Randall Monroe. Didn't he do that calculation? I think he did. It'd be kind of chilly.
Yes.
I'm not a scientist, but I would be happy to be a tourist. Now, I did attend the Division of Planetary Sciences. They call it a conference, but it's a convention a few years ago, because I was in their art show. And the one thing I learned was that if you want to be a planetary scientist, you better really know your chemistry, because it was like going to chemistry school for a week. So that's all over my head. So given that I've got my good anti-radiation suit, I want to go walking and hiking around Io. Because it would be, I think, fabulously beautiful, and think of what you're going to see when you look up. That giant Jupiter over your head, which I consider to be like the most artistic of planets. I just love the swirls, the turbulence. You know, it's better than most abstract artists' abstract art.
Okay, so I think from these answers, you can see that there's a tremendous diverse set of motivations for why people want to go. Because you want to find a place where there's interesting biology. You've always been curious about biology. Because you want to find a place where there's phenomenal beauty, because you're an artist. Because you want to explore, because at your heart you're a scientist. Because you want to fly, because at your heart you're a geek, a science fiction geek. All of these are legitimate. And we could work out, you know, a mission where you could get to do all of them, maybe, on a super. But I think it shows the challenge of trying to declare one place to be the goal, one mission to be the goal. And in that sense, I think we've already answered the first question about having, you know, I'm not somebody's stepping stone, as the famous song once put it. We're all gray enough that we know the reference.
You called it.
Yeah.
For that being the case, do you think going to the moon right now is a good first step to all of these different goals? And especially sending human beings to the moon. Because we all know there's arguments that can be made on either side. My argument, you've all seen the movie or read the book, The Right Stuff, that had the famous line, "No Bucks, no Buck Rogers." But I think we saw with the end of the Apollo program, if there's no Buck Rogers, there won't be any Bucks. And I think we need to have human beings in space as a way of generating all of these different opinions among the people who are going to pay for it. Tell me I'm wrong.
Nope, not going to tell you you're wrong. My thing with the moon being a stepping stone is I don't think it should be a stepping stone. It can be a goal. I don't. One of the big frustrations for me is why do we always have to have a goal, and why do we have to all agree on one goal? My dream of how space exploration should be done is to actually use the model that we always compare it to and that science fiction loves, which is that space exploration is supposed to be like and I have a twitch about colonialization and whether or not that's not a great model for a culture at all. But our model for space exploration seems to generally be, let's go out and colonize space. But if you actually look at that era of history, the age of exploration, it was not a goal. It was everybody going off in all directions, doing what they wanted and with their own goals. That happens when you filter it through hindsight. Oh, clearly this is how it happened. It's like, no, for every Columbus, there were 100 other expeditions that maybe didn't go anywhere or sank. But nobody said, no, let's just give our money to just Columbus. So I want to see lots of gold. I want to see, let Elon Musk put a car into orbit. I'd rather he didn't put chains of satellites up there, but that's a whole different panel. Bringing everybody into it so that it's not just one. That's me.
Jim, when did you take it?
All right. Well, yes, the satellites, of course, the
Using
people
the
who-
microphone, of course.
Yes, to the satellites, obviously the large number of people on the planet who have no internet access would certainly appreciate that. As to goals, I think that is a term that gets wrapped up when you talk about a nation having goals. SpaceX has its own goals. Blue Origin has its own goals. Bigelow Aerospace had its own goals. And one thing that we can do as a nation is to not put roadblocks, in the way of people who want to have goals. Help them when they're doing what we consider, this is where we want to go. As a nation, goals focus our attention on something, because we can't do everything. We don't have the money for it. So you have to figure out, okay, what is the best path forward? So I see the moon as both a stepping stone as well as being an endpoint, because we can go there and there are things we can do there, but we can use those experiences to help us then go further and take, more steps into the solar system. And I think it's very important that we have a very strong commercial component to this. So this year was a great year, or 2021 was a great year for me because of all the space tourism flights, because we will never have space settlement if it's limited to being, short-term visits by government employees. We have to build up the economics, the infrastructure, and then see if it actually makes sense, if we could make a go of this thing. So.
I agree with Jim that the question of should Mars be our goal or should the moon be our goal in the near term, not in the century time scale we were kind of talking about earlier. That it's a priority setting thing for a nation or another organization that has that has to set its priorities with limited resources, and it's long been assumed that people are not going to go to Mars unless a large government or a group of governments has decided that's what they want to pay for it, and they pay for it. There's now reason to question that assumption in the new landscape, but it's still a pretty good assumption right now. And the question is Mars the most important thing for the United States to be putting most of its chips on in human exploration? And frankly, the notion that the moon is a stepping stone strikes me as, well, I think it's a fine goal, and I'm happy for the country to go and do some more moon exploration and get better at astronaut stuff and rovers and using the resources of the landscape to do useful things. It seems like a distraction from, if we want to explore Mars, it would really be fine to just start building toward exploring Mars, towards sending people to Mars and figuring out a sensible program of why the people go to Mars and how long you're going to be supporting the things that they do there. Nobody wants to just plant the flag and come back. It's got to be part of an ongoing program of Mars exploration or an ongoing program of moon exploration that leads ultimately to Mars landing, but then beyond to an ongoing program of Mars exploration. And also people back home rolling up their sleeves and starting to think about where we should be sending people next.
One of the issues I think that came up actually with Karen's answer that got me thinking on this is we often assume a kind of evolutionary teleology, which reminds me of bad evolution ideas.
Yeah.
You teach kids that, four-legged animals developed eyes that had stereoscopic vision so that they could hunt better. As if some animal someplace along the line said, stereoscopic vision would be really good. How can I get there? That's not the way it works. And that's not the way that exploration works. In retrospect, you can see, these were the things that were motivating folks, but the folks being motivated at the time may not even have recognized that. The other point that Jim brings up is that there's more than one player in the game. And so each player is going to have a different set of goals, sometimes overlapping, but I want to make money is not the same thing as I want to make money and not him, which is, adds an extra, adds an extra twist to the set of goals. So that leads to a question of how do you coordinate these goals? And I think that's kind of where you were going a little bit with your answer. Do you think that the world needs a forum where there are apparently 20 different entities right now, corporations or nations or collectives that are capable of launching rockets into space?
Okay.
Should there be a place where they all get together and say, this is how we're going to parcel up space?
When you put the question that way, why sure, Brother Guy, there should be.
Or is this actually us trying to control things, and maybe we're better off letting nature evolve the way it would normally
Now,
do?
there have been attempts in history to create such a forum, right? Isn't that what COSPAR is for, in part?
And the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, which, talking about sex in space, I guess, but I love the fact that they still refer to it as outer space.
The Committee on Useful Pieces of Outer Space? Does that
Committee on the Peaceful Use.
Oh, sorry. The Committee on the Pieces of Outer Space.
Yeah. And then, of course, you
I was thinking of the joke title.
You have the groups that they have launch. Oops, sorry. Reporting launch to allocation of bandwidth. And now we have a new phraseology that's entered our vocabulary, space traffic management. Because now that the population is booming of satellites, and in the future commercial space stations as well, we have to begin to actually think about, okay, how are we going to coordinate all this stuff so that we don't go haywire up there? How do we handle space debris management? And of course, on the other side of that, it's like, what are you going to do if somebody violates it? Like examples of being China and Russia carrying out anti-satellite missile tests and causing an explosion in space debris.
At the moment, there are something like 80 nations, 80 nations of the UN, about half the UN, who have officers and offices in their government to deal with space. Places that you might not think of, but in fact for whom space is really important, such as a lot of the sub-Saharan nations in Africa, where they need data from space to keep track of resources and to map places that are otherwise inaccessible. So they are in the market for getting space data, using space data. And space data, in a sense, is kind of like the internet, in which things are free. How are you going to pay for it? Because the data that's out there is, even if you had proprietary data and you were trying to hold on to, we know how successful that will be. Most places that produce the data will give it away, but then they have to figure out other ways of monetizing the data beyond having the pretty pictures.
Now, in the question of a forum, there was that time you were a diplomat for a little while.
Indeed.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I had to be a diplomat, yes. So I'll tell the whole story. What the heck?
Yeah, all right.
I'm head of the Vatican Observatory. We've got this little outfit with a dozen astronomers. Our goal is to be small but good. We're halfway there. And we have a little place in the Papal Gardens in the summer home of the popes outside of Rome, and it's really beautiful. And somebody came to us and from the State Department saying, we have a friend who has a friend who is going to be running a big meeting held by the UNOOSA, UN Office of Outer Space Affairs in Vienna, and they want to have a workshop to prepare for it. So could we use your offices? basically we would meet in your quarters for 3 days in March before the big meeting in June, and they'd have a paper audience at the end. Maybe they'll get people to come. And I said, sure, you're welcome. Come on, as long as you do all the work of organizing it. And a month beforehand, I hadn't heard anything else, so I said, well, should I start inviting people? Oh, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So I invited a bunch of my friends who mine asteroids and that sort of thing, and friends who study asteroids. And then a few other diplomats showed up, and a very obnoxious, is this being recorded? A wonderfully important, very important Italian scientist who had absolutely nothing to do with space science invited himself. And we actually, this is where I learned a lot about this sort of diplomacy that's been going on. It was in honor of the 50th anniversary of the original treaty for
the Outer Space Treaty.
The Outer Space Treaty, right, thank you. I knew I could remember that name.
Peace in space, baseball?
Peace in space. So they had a good meeting, they got to meet the Pope, they all went home happy. And then I was invited, well, you want to come to the big meeting in June. It's the last thing in the world I want to do. I had other things to do that time, and what more meetings. And they invited me 3 times, and I turned them down 3 times. And then I got a letter from the Secretary of State of the Vatican, who is essentially the vice president. He's the number 2. When the Pope's not in town, he's the one who signs the checks. And I was informed that I would be leading the Vatican's delegation to this meeting. And they would prepare a speech for me. So when I was in high school, I was in the Model UN. Probably a bunch of you were doing that when you were in high school. Here I was in the real UN. And I swear the Model UN was better organized. That's another panel. So for 2 days, I sat in a big auditorium in Vienna as a representative of every nation got up and read a 7-minute speech prepared by someone else that said, space is good, peace is good. And then they sat down. And the next one would get up and say, space is good, peace is good. There was a little bit of excitement because the representative from the United States, who's a guy I knew from NASA, whose name I'm blanking on, Jim
Green?
Jim Green, thank you. Jim Green got up, and the week before this meeting, President Trump had announced the formation of a military space group. The one other nation that called them out on this was Cuba. So that was exciting. And then I got up and I read my 7 minutes, space is good, peace is good. And the next day, there I am on the front page of many newspapers. Vatican, basically calls out Trump on his militarism. And they're quoting me for the things that I said, which were in the paper that I was handed. The one irony is that there was one phrase in that paper that actually I had written myself, and that was where I was supposedly quoting the Pope from a statement that I had written for him to say, because nobody writes their own thing in diplomacy, right? Everything's written by the famous speechwriter who worked for John Kennedy.
Schlesinger?
The guy who wrote, basically, he was asked, did you actually write the famous inaugural address that President Kennedy read? And his reply was, ask not.
Especially since he stole a quote from Marcus Tullius Cicero.
This is the status of, basically a lot of people saying a lot of folderol, but the real issue is, going back to what Bill said, there's no enforcement. Or was it you, Jim? There's no enforcement.
Yeah.
And there will only be enforcement when everybody agrees there has to be enforcement, and that probably will only happen when somebody gets killed. Or somebody loses money. Because, Jim has built the rocket that's going to mine the asteroid, and Karen has funded the pirates who are going to steal the rocket before it gets back.
Shiver me timbers.
And with no law in space, who's going to stop them? We've definitely done a left turn from where we were going originally.
Yeah.
But wait, we're confused.
We're confused. We're right there. Okay, so in order to get us back on track, let me take questions. So, yeah.
So, earlier there was discussion is, going to the moon first. Should that be a goal, or just go to Mars directly? But there's also the practical realities in that creating a self-sustaining colony is not easy. They've tried it a couple times here on Earth and failed miserably. So doesn't it make sense to go to the moon first, where there's less risk, and and you can do more hands-on adjustment and stuff, versus jumping all the way to Mars and having someone 2 years out, where you can't do anything for them.
Part of the trouble, and you just said it right there, is the people who are making these claims haven't really figured out how big the solar system is. It's 2 days to get to the moon and 2 years to get to Mars. Or half a year at just the right time, and then you got to wait a year and a half before you can come back. The distances in space, the distances in time, and the radiation environment that you're going through make it a completely different problem.
To me, it's like a magician's obfuscation question, because it's like, why should it be one? It can't really be one or the other. It's like saying we're having problems with crop fungus. Should we also be making a better car? They're so far apart. We need to figure out how to get to Mars. That's going to take a while. While we're working on figuring out how to get people to Mars, why can't we also be doing setting up a moon colony that can test out all the things that we'll need, so that once we get to Mars, maybe we won't all die when we get there?
I have thoughts on this subject because the big goals that we talked about at the beginning of the talk are our dreams. I think we need to work backwards from those to what would be the intermediate steps, and then finally, what should we be doing in what should we be doing this year or next year to create a future in which this stuff could possibly happen. And so your question about the difficulty or the difference between moon stuff and Mars stuff, we should, when you work backwards from some big dream like this, where Buck Rogers is going around the solar system and visiting Europaopolis or something, there's really a good many problems that we kind of have a handle on, and that where we could improve things a lot if we put some resources into them. And instead of building something that's a Mars ship this year, or planning what color you're going to paint it, instead of that, let's talk about the technologies that would make this stuff much easier, or the stuff the technologies that are essential to protect people against radiation, or to handle all the robotic needs of a mission, or make much better life support so that sustainable stuff. You can never make 100% sustainable space habitat, but make it get it as close as you possibly can by improving improving life support systems in various ways that are clear possibilities now, and that we need to pursue to get better at this stuff. And I think we should just be putting more effort into fancy technologies and less effort in near-term schemes to go to this body or that body. And of course, there is some resource devoted to those problems right now, and there is, and there always has been. But I just think that the priorities ought to be shifted a little bit, so that what we're putting all our effort into is something that will build a foundation to make options easier, less costly, more sensible, more life-sustaining, a decade or 20 years from now? Like much better spacesuits, for instance.
Go you first, and then.
On that subject of, let's say, Mars versus the moon, Mars is significantly a more difficult target than the moon. You're talking a much longer time frame, which makes it more politically risky. You're also talking much higher hurdles in terms of your capabilities development, which is probably going to rule out most commercial assistance or commercial entities that would be willing to engage it. But going to the moon, if you look at NASA's approach, which is something of a mixed bag, it's got a lot of, and I'm talking about with respect to the Artemis program, there's a lot of good stuff in there. Of course, unfortunately, a lot of the good stuff, that's good stuff in my opinion, is stuff Congress or Washington, D.C. doesn't like. And for me, the biggest bad thing in all of this is SLS, which is not at all sustainable or affordable, but that's what the politicians like. Because it's not a rocket program, it's a jobs program. And that's why it has bipartisan support these days.
SLS stands for?
Officially, SLS stands for Space Launch System, but it's more frequently referred to as the Senate Launch System. And one of the key people, senators who was really pushing this SLS program happens to be the current NASA administrator, Bill Nelson, appointed by Joe Biden when he came in. Now, at the time in 2010, this all happened because Congress got really pissed at Obama, and this is Republican and Democrat bipartisan dismissal of Obama, because he canceled the Vision for Space Exploration and the Constellation program, which was the Ares 1 and Ares 5 rockets.
We're getting deep into the weeds.
Yeah. Anyway, so now we have SLS, but I will say that at the time Bill Nelson said, you know what, if we can't build SLS for $10 billion and have it launch in 2016, we might as well close up shop and go home. Well, it's now 2022, and $30 billion later, we're still waiting for it. So by bringing in commercial entities, you're broadening your base of expertise, and if you can build something, an economic system that's sustainable, that's going to foster a lot of other advances, like we're seeing with the advent of commercial space stations. So we need to get industry to build up their base of expertise.
You've been very patiently waiting to ask your question.
Well, this might just, my question was, no disrespect, but is Mars a waste of time? And with respect to economic development, because it's a huge gravity, well, and if you're going out that far, why not? You solve the problem of long distance, maybe just a little bit longer out to the asteroids. And I'm thinking more in terms of somebody with a history background where no colony that was created that of necessity needed to be more or less self-sustaining has ever cooperated with the Home Office's plans for more than a generation.
That's
So,
a
I mean,
great
as the
point.
science aside, I love all the science stuff coming out of like what you were talking about at the earlier panel. But is it not a good target for, in terms of economic development? Is it a bad target?
And I think there are certainly people at NASA who are looking to exploit asteroids. It's no surprise that a number of recent missions have been asteroid missions, which Bill talked about yesterday at some length. I think that's a great point. I'll counter a little bit of your enthusiasm for private industry by reminding you that basically you're putting the fate of the space program into the hands of Gilbert's pointy-haired boss.
Well, the only difference between this and Apollo is who was managing. and the fact that we only have so much money to go around, and that's what's going to make space sustainable. Going back to...
But I think that point speaks to your point.
Yeah.
There's no money to be made in Mars.
Yeah.
Well, you might want to tell that to Bass Landstorp, the inventor of the Mars One concept. Now, he certainly did make money for himself with his Mars One base, and I suggest people read the MIT analysis of this place.
I would make one correction. I would say that there is money to be made on Mars, but among the Martians.
Yeah,
They're not going to send it back.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
As far as the idea of the moon being a good stepping stone, I think you touched on something when you were talking about using it as practice for establishing a long-term sustainable environment in otherwise hostile environment. Because a point that people can overlook is when you think about going to the moon, you can go to the moon, get out of your spaceship, walk around, and go, wow, cool, I'm on the moon. Get back in and be back home in a couple of days. When you go to the moon, to Mars, you have to wait months and months on Mars for the planets to get back in the right position for you to come home. So it's not a, hey, great, we made it to Mars. High five, let's go home. It's like we have to live here for a while. So you better be pretty good at that before you even go to Mars. Otherwise, you get to go to Mars and die.
And that's with our current level of rocket technology
That's true.
using chemical rockets.
Going back to my original dream of flying on the moon, to me, the goal is to live on the moon. And I can give you 5, I haven't thought of them, but by the time I finish talking, I'll give you 5 reasons to go to the moon. The one is the tourism. It's a spectacular place to be, to see the universe, to experience life in low gravity. Number 2, astronomy. Very soon, the far side of the moon may be the only radio quiet place where we can do radio astronomy. Plus, it's a whole lot easier to build telescopes on a stable platform like that than to have them in satellites. 3, you can collect helium from the solar wind, and helium might have commercial uses it certainly, helium allows you to do things and we're running out of it. That's a case. That was 3 I came up with. Medical reasons. If you're elderly and your bones aren't as good anymore, low gravity would be great. And 5. Can I come up with a 5th one?
Yes. Building materials.
Building materials. From there you can build and launch to go to the asteroids.
I'm still stuck on lunar acres, the new Florida.
Yes. So I have a radical thought, which was inspired by my older brother, who's a blues musician. And he seriously told me at one point in his musical career, Guy, don't smoke dope. It's a gateway drug. It leads you to cigarettes. Cigarettes will kill you. And he's right, and I've avoided both. But the best reason to have Mars as a goal is that maybe the only way we get to go to the moon.
Because we want to go to the moon, so we need something to attract the billionaires to throw money at space exploration. And Mars is juicy. Mars is that way out there. It's easy to say, it's enticing. I personally think the moon is very enticing. I think it's pretty juicy. But everybody looks at the moon, hardly, and nobody did, John Carter at the moon.
Where's the moon then?
Yes.
So how soon will we have pigs in space?
Well, that was the whole part of it. Who's going to be enforcing the laws, right? All right, we have about 5 minutes. I think we've covered, I've covered all the things I had written down. Starting again from Bill, do you have a point that you really were hoping to be able to make before we go home and have lunch?
Indeed I do. Because I made a passionate speech earlier on about science, advocating for science and exploring all the themes. But I'd also like to put in a good word for the really cool idea that material on Earth is heavy and it's expensive to lift it into space, but material on asteroids in particular, but also on the moon, is already in space and has the potential to be the building materials for cool things that you can think of that you would like to build in space. Now, there might not be customers for those cool things yet, or for those building materials, but that is a thing that our envisioned future with people living here and there around the solar system, is going to need. And so space mining and all the technologies of fabricating useful metals, useful gases, useful other stuff from the soil you find on the moon or the material you find in various asteroids. That's a line of research I would like to see open up and the possibilities explored. We already have a couple of failed asteroid mining companies, so we're on the road to eventual success.
Yeah, and I just want to say that be wary of what you read on the internet. I have to say over the last 7-8 months, I'm very much dismayed by a lot of the, should I call it hate reporting, directed at Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and SpaceX for their successes in space tourism. And I'd also like to point out that, and I use this as one of my presentations, the headlines talking about how in 2017, asteroid mining was going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So at this point in time, it's not even a multi-penny industry. So keep up with what's going on. The Artemis 1 mission just got pushed back again. That's a unmanned circumlunar flight. Look up the Dear Moon project, which is going to be a manned circumlunar flight by
Not to be
carried out
critical,
SpaceX.
person
Not to be
piloted.
Piloted,
Yes.
that's good.
Yes.
Inhabited? Human?
Human.
We'll have humans aboard, but maybe pigs. It's like, I'm wondering who's gonna put pigs up on a space station just to see what happens.
It'll only be square.
I don't have a singular point. I like what Jim said earlier about not putting roadblocks in the way of people who want to do it. But on the other hand, you do need somebody to make rules and enforce rules. I think that's pretty much boils it down to we're humans and this is a constant conflict. And as somebody who lives in the northwest suburbs, you can see the areas where the growth happened explosively and without any planning doesn't work nearly as well as the areas that were actually planned out and set up so it works. So I just hope that we find a way to get our 20 launch-ready entities and our 80 government entities who want space good, peace good, to come together. I'm such an optimist. I want them to come together and
Yes.
I don't think we'll ever have one, but maybe we could use them somehow. That's what I'd like to see.
Can I add a footnote? This is like not on the main line of thinking as we conclude the panel, but I just thought of something I wanted to tell you. I mentioned failed asteroid mining companies, and one of them is Planetary Resources, I think, right? And it's sad that they went out of business, but the people that did that are smart people, and they'll find other work. So there's hope, but as these startups close down, you have to sell off the office furniture and the filing cabinets and infrared cameras and laboratory apparatus that Planetary Resources has. There was an auction, and for all of this surplus stuff, and Planetary Resources had in their office a vintage cabinet video game or I should say vector graphics game. They had an asteroids game from the arcade that you could, put quarters into or something.
That's going to finance their mission to the asteroid.
Right. So when they closed down, their asteroids game was auctioned off, and I was thinking, like, the asteroids game that was played by people who tried but failed to start asteroid mining is going to be someday, if there ever really is asteroid mining, this is going to be a historic artifact, right? The brave failed pioneers, and that machine ought to be in a museum. It was already vintage when they got it, but now there's a historical significance attached to it that nobody recognizes today. But in 50 years, it could be important.
Every good science fiction story is about people, and every good bit of science and engineering is about people. And thank you for reminding us of that, and it's people and their dreams that are moving us forward. Thanks everybody for coming.